Welcome to the Valley Advocate Podcast, featuring interviews that take us deeper into the people and happenings on the local scene. For more podcasts and a closer look at what's going on in the Valley, visit us at valleyadvocate.com.
Hello, welcome to the Valley Advocate Podcast. I am Dave Eisenstadter, editor of the Valley Advocate, and I'm here with Karima Rizk, one of our Cannabis columnists, and just cannabis extraordinaire. Welcome, glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
So you've written a couple things for us recently, but what I really want to start with is you wrote this really great, like how to grow, or what the laws are around it and how to actually do it in Massachusetts. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your experience growing at your place.
Yeah. Well, that article entitled How to Grow Your Weed Outdoors was a wonderful opportunity to see what it's like to be a consumer in 2019 and to exercise our new legal rights to grow cannabis outdoors. And so I got to talk to a few experts and go through the process of purchasing the materials. I have my babies, my little ladies, growing in my basement. They're little guys right now, or gals, I should say.
And it's the female part of the plant.
It is the female that we do want, that side of the gender spectrum. But then, and then also outside, I have one clone someone has since gifted me, and that fella or lady is now outside.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of people maybe are interested in growing their own weed, or exercising that legal right, but maybe they don't know how to get started. Like, what would you say to someone like that?
Sure. Well, I think the best thing is just to jump in wherever you're comfortable. If you've ever grown a little plant as a school project or even in your yard, it's just as simple as putting in a seed and getting the water started, really, or pouring in the water and putting in soil. So I think that's the basic thing, is just kind of getting over your fear of like, oh, this is so complicated, and it's really not rocket science. The other thing is sourcing seeds. It's a little bit hard right now because not a lot of retail stores, no licensed cannabis retail stores currently carry seeds for sale. So folks must either order them online through vendors, whether in the United States or overseas, oftentimes in Amsterdam or London. And then also there are different ways to exchange and trade, which is completely legal. Places, some of the trade shows and harvest cups are a great place to go. We have an annual harvest cup in Worcester. So look for the name Genetics. That's usually a cue. In the article, I made a few recommendations passed on to me. Another recommendation is, if you can, try to go local, because the plant will be known to grow locally, and or the grower will have detailed information about what the climate is like around here. And also supporting the local economy is really important too.
Yeah, I remember one, I think Facebook commenter on your piece was talking about how, oh man, back in the day we would curse out whenever there were seeds in what we would buy, and now they sell for like $10 each or something. I wish I had saved all those seeds or something. Just kind of interesting how things like turn around like that.
That's a great comment, and it was back in the day. You get a baggie and it'd be seedy weed, and you could plant it and see what happens. Today, the seeds they sell, they retail for approximately $10 for $100 or $10 for one. Usually you have to get them in 5 or 10 packs, but they're much more highly specialized. Oftentimes they're feminized, so that takes the guesswork of knowing if you have a male or female plant. You will know exactly the strain and oftentimes what the properties are that come with it. Also ratios, if folks are interested in CBD and want maybe less psychoactivity, they can customize the type of experience they want through the strain selection.
And CBD, could you talk a little bit about what that
Absolutely. So
means?
Cannabidiol, or CBD, is a compound or cannabinoid found in cannabis. And cannabis has many. The most prominent and the ones that occur in the greatest concentration are THC and CBD. CBD tends not to have as much of a psychoactive effect, although it can be very calming. And sometimes that in itself can be a little bit of a euphoric relief. But in general, it's been found quite safe and tolerable. It's great for anxiety, for gastrointestinal issues, arthritis, cancer, all sorts of things, depression, ADHD. There's a lot of great studies, also epilepsy. So it's an attractive option for a couple reasons as well, because you can source CBD through a cannabis plant, including getting it from a licensed cannabis dispensary, or you can also get it in genetically engineered high CBD hemp that you don't need a license for. And consequently, we're finding a proliferation of hemp CBD products in places like everything from health food stores. CVS will soon be carrying it. I just saw on DSW in the Holyoke Mall has CBD creams for aching feet. So all over the place, you don't need a license. The one thing I will say for any consumer is just make sure you know where your products are coming from, and try to get as much information as a savvy consumer. That's something I talk about in my upcoming dosing article as well, about CBD is a wonderful nutritional supplement or something to add to your diet. It's usually very well tolerated, and oftentimes it's the first of the cannabinoids that they may try to give to, say, a pediatric patient or maybe an elderly patient who doesn't want any of the experience with THC. But it's an unregulated industry right now. So that means is we don't know where the plants are coming from. We don't know their test results. And in some cases, there have been instances where law enforcement has actually tested the products they've pulled off and found those to be the claims to be debunked. So it's really important, no matter where you get your products, whether they're homegrown, whether they're from a dispensary, or even from just a grocery or health food store, just to have as much information to make a safe consumer choice.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come back to talking about dosing again, but I want to return to just growing your own outside. And so once you get those seeds and you're off and running, do you find that it's a particularly easy or difficult plant to work with compared to, say, peas or other things you might be growing in your garden?
Well, I'd say there's some aspects. In general, it's a weed, so have faith, it will grow, and it will grow pretty well. But that said, there are some special considerations. For example, as I'm learning with my first generation of plants, it's recommended that you start your plants from seedlings indoors in a little tent, and then when they're big and strong enough, usually around Memorial Day, if you're going around the cycles of growing, you would transfer your plants outdoors once they're hardy enough. So the element of kind of growing with a 24-hour lamp and think about water is a little bit, those are a few more variables, a little more complicated. But that said, it really isn't. And I also find it's kind of a wonderful, holistic kind of growing environment. Some people get into their gardens and have nirvana, find peace and inner peace. And the more I talk to people, including when I interviewed the gentleman over at the Here We Grow, can't recall his name offhand, wonderful guy with a lot of grow experience. He was just talking about how it becomes really a meditative stance, and also there's a relationship. So it becomes addictive, not just in, hey, I'm getting less expensive cannabis, but also you really like it. And each time you grow, each time you iterate, you do it better. So there's a craft, there's an art, there's science, and people who do it generally report a high satisfaction in doing it.
Just having that relationship with the plants and kind of working through that, that's a really interesting aspect of that. So you're not anywhere near harvest yet, are you?
No.
So what's kind of the time cycle of planting the seed, and like how long does it take to grow and all that?
Sure. Well, as a novice grower, I'll have to claim. So they're getting, my little guys, or gals, I keep calling them guys, they're getting big enough to finally get outdoors. So I need to go plant them. They're straight enough. They're about yay high.
Yep, about like a foot.
Yeah, about give or take. And soon I'm going to have them co-mingle, which I'm really excited about in my garden. It's not going to be isolation, and I'm really excited about the living natural soil elements. For example, having ladybugs and worms and natural organic additives that can help improve the environment as a whole ecosystem, kind of integrated with literally with my vegetables growing all around it. So that's kind of exciting for me. I should expect this summer that especially as the light cycles change and as the days start getting shorter and shorter from June 22nd, that's going to affect the plants, and that'll be a natural cue to them to start their flowering cycle. So I'm looking forward to that. They're going to be getting bigger and budder, and I will also, some of the seeds I started with were not sexed, they're not feminized. So that means I have to look and try to see the ones that look like they're growing little seeds almost, you can kind of tell, or it looks like they're growing little hairs.
So that's like kind of another exciting way to kind of interact with a plant, is kind of find out what it is. Yeah,
absolutely. And, it's just a learning experience for right now, but it's really exciting to think about the added bonus and frankly, even the value that translate if I get anything. The windfall can be worth hundreds of dollars of products.
Yeah. And I guess there's a few legal considerations too. I mean, there's a limit to how many plants you can grow, right?
That's true.
And where they
That's
can
correct.
be on your property?
That's right. Absolutely. So in Massachusetts, the law is that you may have up to 6 plants per adult. And if you have more than one adult, you may have up to 12 for a household. In terms of where and how, the law says you have to have it either under observation for a camera or under a lock, so you can do one or the other, or if you want, you can have concurrent systems. Additionally, it can't be visible by the public without the use of binoculars or from a plane. So essentially that means you can't naturally look over and see someone's plant. In my instance, I happen to be planting closer to a 6-foot fence that will help, I think, remediate some of the issues of someone seeing over. But certainly a concern is that cannabis plants can grow higher. So, maybe as a kind of workaround to be compliant, I might end up lobbing off little pieces, just to keep it under. It's, there's no textbook way how to do this. I happen to live in suburbia. Other folks who are in more rural areas really won't have to worry about neighbors complaining.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to kind of check in as you go further in the process and maybe get a harvest article out of you if we can.
Delighted. Absolutely.
Also wanted to talk about, like we said before, dosing. I think, one of the really difficult issues for the states that have legalized medical marijuana and now recreational is people just having too much or freaking out or finding out what's safe and what's comfortable, and on the medical side, what is an appropriate dose to treat whatever ailment they have. And you just wrote this great piece on dosing.
Thank
so
you.
Maybe could you talk a little bit about kind of what went into that and how those decisions get made?
Absolutely. I think dosing is so important for any cannabis user because it really sets up the experience you want to have. When you hear of some of the really scary incidents of people who maybe, I highlighted one where in Martha's Vineyard, 3 people passed out. Definitely most of us know people who've had extreme anxiety. You think about those really bad reactions. Many times that can come back to dosing, and they did not have the proper dose. Oftentimes they over-medicated and they have these negative side effects that were way too strong. So dosing sets it up so that in a discrete, measurable way, you can know how much to consume for exactly what you're trying to achieve, whether that's medical, whether it's wellness, or whether it's recreational adult use.
Yeah. And are there, there are lots of ways that people consume cannabis now. And I think that, from edibles to shatter, other things that probably people haven't heard of. Are there dosing considerations with the way that you consume cannabis as well?
Absolutely. So some of the most easy products that lend themselves to dosing. And again, we're looking at measurable, trying to know exactly how many milligrams of cannabinoids, including THC and CBD. By law, the adult use retail and medical dispensaries in the state have to have the testing results and product label information. So that's really important. And just like someone would use, go to the grocery store and buy a box of cereal, the FDA mandates a food label and it tells you what's in it. So too, should you know what the components and constituents are of the material you're consuming. So going back to edibles, I find that's a really great way. Massachusetts has us have individual servings, whether they're scored or broken apart, to make it really super easy. So you're not hopefully eating the whole chocolate bar before you're doing it. You're looking and saying, each piece is 5 milligrams. The gummies, tinctures, there's so many. But one thing I love is that there's a lot of product innovation in the cannabis industry. And so some of the products I highlighted were both really great ways to dose, but also discreet and kind of coming to your point about renting. I was surprised you could never, ever know that, you're using that. So it could be to maintain privacy and for all sorts of reasons. If you have kids in the house, it becomes really unobtrusive to anyone else around you.
Yeah. And so I want to talk to you. So you're sort of making your way through the fledgling cannabis industry, and I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what that experience has been like.
Sure. Would you like me to talk about what I'm doing now?
You had your experience with kind of working with Cafe Verde, and you've taken on a bunch of new responsibilities now. Sure.
So I'd be happy to share some of those. So many folks came to learn about me and about my venture Cafe Verde in 2017. I had it going strong for about a year and a half before I put it on hold. And that was a venture for social consumption in East Hampton, Massachusetts. And many of the steps had been achieved. I had a location. I was ready to sign a host community agreement. But unfortunately, even to this date, now in 2019, that class of license still has not been finalized. Social consumption licensing. Still waiting. And now they're baby steps. They're talking about a pilot program and working groups. But still, even from now, Commissioner Shalene Title, for example, is saying it could be years before. And then who knows, and we also don't know what that will look like. For example, if social consumption places like coffee houses can sell cannabis, or if that right is relegated to dispensaries. So there are a lot of questions to be answered. So after I learned how to go through the licensing process and have my own venture, and I could not move forward with that, I got to do a lot of other things in my spare time. One of the most exciting things was to try to pass social consumption at the municipal level. In the law, there is a provision to have a municipal ballot procedure. So I became a chairwoman and formed a political committee with fellow East Hampton residents, and we attempted to go through and pass a social consumption ballot. However, unfortunately, we ran into conflicts where the Secretary of State's office would not let us proceed because really they felt that the law could not be fully carried out. There weren't the proper forms and procedures. So now that issue is before the state legislature. But it was really exciting to play one tiny role in trying to push the conversation forward and also expose where maybe things sound better in theory in legislative draft rather than in practice at the local level. I've had the wonderful privilege to continue in talking about equity and my opportunity and experiences as a social consumption enterprise, as a female minority in a really difficult industry where a lot of us have not been able to succeed. That's been the larger story in Massachusetts. But I have to say, having been to literally years of attending planning board and city council hearings for cannabis, another entrepreneur recognized that I was in the same space and asked me to join his venture. So I am now the director of operations at the Verb is Herb in East Hampton. It's one of the first small independent retail cannabis stores coming to like a main street, not an industrial zone. So it's coming to Cottage Street this summer. So
well,
really
congratulations.
Excited. And thank you.
You to your point before, do you have any recommendations about how to make the cannabis industry more welcoming to women, people of color, just to improve that equity as you were talking about before?
That is a really big question. It's a conversation that's going on with the Cannabis Control Commission and the state in earnest, and nobody really knows the best solution. There is a program. I'd highly encourage anyone to see if you may qualify. The social equity program is open, and there are economic empowerment candidates But unfortunately, as I found out, if you didn't apply in the first 2 weeks back in April, then you can't apply until they take care of those folks. So that said, though, some of the other things that I learned from my own experience, I would really encourage people to try to find mentors. To attend. There are a lot of educational events, and there are dialogues, whether it's industry mixers or an event I'm helping to put on January 19th is the Pioneer Valley Cannabis Industry Summit. And so we have 2 panels. One's on small business and the other is on social equity and trying to drive that conversation forward. So all over the states, there are events and educational things to do, but it is really, really hard. And I'd say try to build up your support as much as possible. And the last thing is actually leverage your advantages. Many of the large organizations, they aren't familiar with the local people or the government, or maybe they don't know what the zoning ordinances are yet. They have to hire someone to help them. But as a small local person, there's a good chance that you know people who vote, who are residents. Maybe you're a parent, and those are all hats that you can wear and use to your advantage. And I'd really encourage people to start having that conversation with their local government who has to support their application when they apply for licensing. I think we will be able to have those opportunities. We just have to keep at it and find lean, smart ways to do it so we can stay in the industry.
Karima, thank you so much for coming in. Real pleasure talking with you about cannabis and a lot of the topics there. So thanks so much.
Truly my pleasure, Dave.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to visit us at valleyadvocate.com.